Okay, hey. Well, there is a contact. Here is our presentation. Let's give the opportunity to come in to connect. I see a firm of participants. Good morning, who is plugging in? Our last class with you today. So there you go. Great, more people are coming in. Hey, everybody. Hey, who is just getting hooked up? In half a minute, we are off to a good morning start. Indeed, happy good fall morning. The last warm days are upon us. Well, that's good. Yeah, I think it is time for us to get started. But you do not have it anymore. We still have sunshine. It's warm during the day, but cool in the morning. Okay, let's get started. Good morning again, everyone. Glad to welcome you to the course on developing a job profile. We have a fifth session today. We are talking about using the profile for different processes, recruiting, development, performance management assessments, and so on. This is our last class. And today we are going to break down the different options. So let's talk about how you can use the post profile and its different elements. I think everyone has figured out for themselves by now that the job profile has basically two big parts. There is the competency profile, where we described competencies, categories of behavioral indicators, and there is the job profile itself, where various other elements are described. They are such two equal parts in favor. About the language of competence. Let's summarize. This helps us to commiserate valuable employee behaviors, raise the competency bar for all employees. That is, when we update the model, we can thereby raise the bar. Emphasis on people's abilities, as opposed to just positions for competitive advantage. Encouraging cross-functional team behavior critical to business success, reinforcing new values while continuing to support the achievement of business objectives. Closing the skills gap, supporting superior performance in unit roles that have a critical impact on organizations, focusing people's attention on the overall quality of consumer-driven, consumer-oriented behavior, and facilitating the movement of people within businesses and across global borders. These are the main areas where we can use the language of competence. Let me remind you, we looked at a model like this where we use both competencies and job profile. This includes recruiting and training, performance management, and legislative issues. But today we're going to look at a few of these more detailed approaches. The first, of course, is recruiting. Since the most important activity with any company is hiring people, without hiring, basically everything else won't work. Then first of all, the job profile and competence model and profile should be used in recruiting, starting to involve such a tool as scorecards, a map for evaluating candidates. It's here. When we have a job profile, we can use this tool more intelligently, more efficiently, without having to make a new soon-to-be formatted profile every time, as is usually the case. A position opens with a company, and depending on employment, the hiring manager of the recruiter, with different qualities of scorecard cooked or not cooked. Sometimes it's done in a rush, we're in a hurry, we can't have a proper discussion of responsibilities, we can't have a proper discussion of expectations, but it's okay to discuss positions and it's okay not to fix hard skill and soft skill when all this work was done in advance. So when we've described all the job profiles and we have that all ready to go, we've done it through the right process. Next, when a job opening comes up, we simply take the ready-made job profile and prepare a soon-to-be job from it. We no longer have the need to rush or fantasize about anything. That is, we can just fill out such a document. Let me remind you that it can be prepared in the format of an Excel document or Google Spreadsheet if you use such a tool, i.e. in the form of tables. Well, this is basically something you do manually every time, and for every candidate, for every vacancy. Or modern tracking system ATS systems, they are starting to contain scorecard functionality as well. That is, you can create a scorecard. What is the plus point of these systems is that once a scorecard is created in that system, it can be reused already for the same vacancy. Therefore, scorecard-based recruiting is the first application of a job profile. Well, the point of the scorecard is that you basically have this set of criteria for candidates, and you, through different stages of selection, there's a phone call, an HR interview, a test task, there might be an interview with an understanding manager or an expert. The final interview, you gather information already regarding the job profile and score it. This way, you get a comprehensive assessment of the candidate and can compare candidates against each other based on their scores. Next, What's important to understand as in evaluation is to use everything as intelligently as possible. In evaluation, we have different tools that give different accuracy of evaluation. This is researched and studied for us. There's this great work where there's been an analysis of how different assessment tools candidates are evaluated and how this evaluation then compares with the further work of candidates already on the job. Here's the same thing. I've highlighted the most interesting here and translated it into Russian. Thus, the estimation methods listed at the top, they are the most accurate compared to those lower down. If anyone is interested in the study, you can read it here. So what are some of the ways that we can evaluate for our Skorok when we have a duty profile described and we're doing it in an increasingly systematic way? The first tool that is globally considered the most accurate in terms of predicting future performance is the General Mental Ability Test, or it's also called GMA General Mental Ability. It's very similar to an IQ test because an IQ test essentially also measures general abilities. It has different tasks, for example, visual ones like shown here, but it can also involve text, numbers, and other formats. There are various ready-made solutions that can be used for this purpose. There's Cognifit, but those are more one-time tests. AST, on the other hand, is one of the best assessment systems out there. It's online. You can assess any number of candidates without limits for a fixed fee. And there are other tests as well. Here's a Russian version called Projection. There are also examples of this approach. If you need to replicate something for free, here's a collection of what's available for free for applying this tool. Next is the test assignment. The test assignment is really an awesome thing. It's very close to general mental ability tests in accuracy, with 51% accuracy here compared to 54% there. So it has a high degree of predicting future job performance. Companies generally use test assignments, but not for every position, which is a shame because test assignments allow you to truly evaluate candidates. However, the test assignment shouldn't be abstract, but as closely related as possible to what the person will be doing. So here, the job profile can guide us on what test assignment will allow us to check the knowledge and skills listed there, and which most accurately describes or reflects the job tasks. My first question for you today is, in recruiting, how actively do you use test assignments? Let's use a 10-point scale. 10 points means absolutely all positions without exception are evaluated using a test assignment. 0 points means test assignments are not used at all. How many points would you give on this scale? 10, great. 8. Oh, for support, I see. By the way, for support roles, a typical test assignment is in the form of a role play. If, for example, the support job involves answering calls, then the test assignment is a role play scenario of a customer calling in. Confirm if that's how you do it. So in the test assignment, we observe the professional knowledge required for the position on one hand, but on the other hand, competencies. Okay, not yet. All right, let's move on. There are test assignments for managers, and since it's difficult to have a manager conduct employees, and one of the tasks is to manage employees, they are given simulation exercises that are designed for assessment centers, which can also be used in test assignments. These include exercises with a set of letters, call reports, or role-playing with an employee, or some kind of case study, or even a group exercise if several managers are interviewing. Next, the scorecard assessment tool. We need to think through all evaluation methods in advance and then apply these methods to assign scores. When planning a test assignment, which is included here under testing, think about which specific candidate requirements we can check with the test assignment. Which hard skills and possibly even soft skills or competencies. Next, the next assessment tool is the interview, which is always part of recruiting. The interview should be structured. That means all candidates should be asked the same questions, but the interviewer can ask different follow-up questions. And one of the most useful types of structured interviews is the behavioral interview, where in talking to a candidate, we assess how the person has handled different situations in the past. That is, we evaluate actual experience, not hypothetical scenarios. We don't ask, what would you do, but what did you do when? So in the past, and then additional questions are asked to the candidate to understand if they have the required qualifications. It's believed that the best predictor of a person's future performance is their past performance and effectiveness. Finally, competency interviews are conducted to assess the competencies we've described. The candidate is asked to provide an example of a past situation related to a specific competency. There are different ways to phrase the questions. For example, give an example of a situation from the past when you needed to, and then the competency is stated, like adapt to constantly changing circumstances. Use the description of the competency, not just its name, because people might interpret the name differently than we do, so it's better to give a description of the competency. Sometimes companies use group interviews, and the group aspect can be from different angles. On one hand, it can be many candidates and usually several assessors. On the other hand, it can be one candidate and several assessors. Generally, all these group interviews are to save time. By the way, in assessment centers, for some regular entry-level positions, companies conduct group interviews and use various assessment tools, simplified test assignments, simplified role plays to see how people behave. Then scores are assigned for each competency and each requirement. You need to be very careful with scoring too. Ideally, there should be a 5-point grading scale, where a score of 3 meets the requirements. That is, if a person knows something to the extent required for the role, they get a score of 3. Scores of 4 and 5 are only given if the candidate exceeds expectations in some way. This allows us to avoid inflated scores and truly identify particularly talented candidates, because when scorecards are first implemented, people often give 5s when a candidate just meets the requirements. And then you end up with many candidates with 5s, making it difficult to choose. When the default grade is 3 if everything meets the requirements, and only in some cases 4 and 5 if the candidate demonstrates something super outstanding, then it's easier to choose. Next up is a test assignment. How to cook it. It has to be a real challenge. That is, it should not be a fictional something from the category of fiction or something very abstract, but a real task. And there are tests that are given for the interview. They are short. There are test assignments that are given at home. Then they should take preferably no more than 5 hours. If you have to, you can think of ways you can thank the person with some sort of gift or payment. Paying for it is a challenge. For example, when we were looking for an employer brand manager, we asked for an employer brand strategy. It's such hard work, and it looks as if the company wants to strategize for free. To ensure that candidates had no doubts, we offered the following scheme to the candidates. We said, we'll pay you, it's a test assignment. You will estimate for yourself the cost of your hour and how much time you have spent, and write to us. And so people wrote to us, usually not very brazenly. That is the amount we paid, $100, $150 to $200. But we're getting a good test assignment. It allowed us to choose a candidate or a gift. That is, when the tasks were simpler, the kind of tasks that the candidate had an understanding of, but that would definitely not be used by the company, because the employer brand strategy was really suspect. The company wants to develop for free. When it is just a technical task, for example, we gave technical directors the task to talk to different employees, to understand the situation, that is, to conduct a kind of audit. Here we were giving those who made everything gifts in the form of a briefcase. The test assignment should have predetermined criteria for successful completion. The opportunity should be to ask questions of the person who performs and personal presentation and results. That is, the person must personally present it all. And then you test assignments, compare relative to the profile of duty on the scores to assign grades. That is, not just like dislike, but spread out according to the profile of the post. Next, role-playing is for positions where face-to-face interaction by salespeople is important, or as a support person if it's in a dialogue format. This here looks like a real scene played out by the candidate and the person interviewing him. That is, the candidates usually say. And now we are going to play a real role-playing game with you, and it is told what the role play will be about, what role, what task. I'll play the disgruntled customer. You're our support operator. Your job is to reassure the customer, for example. And an assignment is given. Here it is important to spell out in advance what exactly we expect from the candidate, so that it is easier for us to evaluate later, and it is desirable to give tasks not from the candidate's experience. If, for example, we are looking at people from both from support and not from support, so that it does not turn out that those who are from support it is easier for them to play it. Then another sphere is taken, perhaps, but it's a similar challenge. Next, it was all about recruiting. So we see the job profile in recruiting. It makes recruiting just systematic, structured, efficient. Now, employee development. Recruitment is the start of the company's employees. We, through recruiting, can take a person. The second thing that is likely to happen is employee development, where also the job profile plays a good supporting role. From an employee development perspective, we are interested in knowledge requirements, skills, and behavioral competencies. And it doesn't matter what form it was recorded in. It's just that this is the part we're most interested in. We use it to create a development plan. So then we, in terms of development, also utilize elements of knowledge, skills, and competencies. And we are, in essence, what we do. We have a specific person, we have a job profile. We're doing an audit. These are the knowledge, skills, and competencies that we have prescribed, to what extent a person corresponds to them. Moreover, we have two options. The first option is if we got the person through recruiting, we essentially have a filled scorecard, and we give it carefully to the training department or training manager. We say, here is our man, here are his evaluations. Next, we need to develop those knowledge, skills, and competencies that receive the lowest scores. Let's plan for development. If, however, you are talking about existing employees, when you have, for example, developed a job profile and people you already have working, they haven't been through scorecard, then you can basically run them through the same scorecard. But not to interview them, not to give them a test task, but with a supervisor, just discuss based on the person's actual work, how the supervisor evaluates these all knowledge, skills, and competencies. For each person, identify development zones, i.e., the most underdeveloped knowledge, skills, and competencies, and plan a development plan on how this can be improved. Accordingly, the job profile is such a benchmark or model for you against which you are evaluated. Here, of course, it would be great if you and your supervisor were not the only ones to discuss it. And if the supervisor will take the job profile and once a year discusses with the employee. Well, for example, it's like this. For example, it's a performance review that's held at the end of the year. Here's your job profile. That's what knowledge, skills, and competencies are needed. Let's discuss where you see your greatest development need. The employee sees and accordingly chooses what is a priority for them at the moment. Thus, the job profile brings more structure to the process of creating a development plan. It adds more structure, provides information, serves as a reference, making it clear what to develop. Because this job profile has been created, hopefully based on behavioral interviews that were conducted, so it contains the most useful knowledge, skills, and competencies. Then methods are selected to help develop the required knowledge, skills, and competencies. Deadlines are set, and the manager tracks how employees are progressing against those deadlines. Here's an additional set of questions to help the supervisor think about what kind of development the employee needs. And here's an additional set of questions for the employee. Both the supervisor and employee should reread the job profile. By the way, they can make adjustments if needed and then just answer the questions. Thus, with structured questions on one side and a job profile on the other, both manager and employee can effectively plan the employee's development. Well, let's give some example questions. The supervisor's questions are roughly as follows. Are there areas of knowledge about methods, systems, processes, procedures, or tools that the employee needs to develop or expand? Are there any skills in demand for this position that need to be developed or acquired? And is there any evidence of desirable behavioral changes in areas such as leadership, teamwork, relationships with internal and external customers? Those are the kinds of questions. And then the managers create a development plan. The employees' questions are, what do I want to achieve this year and in the long term? What are my strengths? How can I use them? Are there aspects of my job that I don't feel as good at as I could be, and so on? And during this development planning, which usually happens during the performance review, if an employee has career ambitions and sees themselves in a future position, they can analyze both their current job profile and the profile of the target position they're interested in and see, okay, so I'm doing fine in my current position, but for the position I'm interested in, here's what knowledge, skills, and competencies I need to develop. Next, employee evaluations. That's another area. It can come before development, Or it can be after development. For example, after developing employees for a while, you decide to evaluate how they're doing. I think every company sooner or later wants to evaluate its employees. Okay, who do we have working for us? How well are our employees performing? Without a job profile, it's really difficult to do a proper evaluation. If we want to assess professionalism, if we want to evaluate results, we can do that without a job profile if employees were given goals. But it's hard to set goals without a job profile. When you have a job profile with everything spelled out clearly, it's easy to set goals. So a job profile is useful even for goal setting. But if we're talking about employees' professionalism, it's really unclear how and who to evaluate if it's not clear what they should know and be able to do. Therefore, in general, a job profile is an invaluable resource for evaluating company employees when that need arises sooner or later. How does an ideal evaluation work? A proper evaluation is not a one-time task. It's not like, let's evaluate our people for something. That would be called an attestation. That kind of one-time assessment, usually to fire some portion of employees, is typically called attestation. You certify, then dismiss. If we're talking about evaluation to understand who we have and what they can do in order to improve the situation afterwards, that kind of evaluation is not independent, but part of something bigger. And this bigger thing is called performance management. Some call it management by objectives. Then the evaluation is an extension of a system in which first there's setting goals for the year, evaluating interim results. After 3 months, after 6 months, setting goals for the second half of the year, evaluating interim results after 9 months, and then there's a final evaluation with a performance review. That's when this assessment is maximally effective and impactful. This evaluation can assess results, purely what was achieved, or assess behavior, how it was achieved. Most often, both behavior and results are evaluated. That is, on one hand, what the employee accomplished. On the other hand, how it was accomplished. Based on this evaluation, a rating is often given. A 5-point rating scale is often used where 5 is the highest score, or some use letters, descriptions, or stars instead of numbers. The highest rating is for a superstar performer, and the lowest rating is usually for those who need to be fired. That's the rating scale. Next, the company can use a tool like displaying the ratings on a graph. The graph can be in a 2x2 or 3x3 format. And this also helps the company understand who is performing how, what development to apply to which employee, who to promote, who to consider for termination. For performance evaluations, a job profile is also needed because we're essentially comparing achieved results against the profile relative to the employee's goals and how they were achieved compared to the required behaviors. Then an overall performance rating is given. Let's move on. 360-degree assessment is another tool and a type of comprehensive employee evaluation, where the job profile will also be useful for us. The 360-degree assessment is most often used to evaluate competencies as part of an employee's evaluation, and in the 360-degree assessment, the employee is evaluated by all parties. The employee evaluates themselves along with their supervisor, colleagues, clients if applicable, and subordinates if they have any. That's where the name 360 comes from. Some can do it offline, some can do it online. Well, of course, most do it online now. The assessment first requires developing a list of competencies. Here again, the job profile helps us because we already have these competencies prepared for all positions. So we take competencies from the job profile, prepare a questionnaire, administer the questionnaire, prepare a report, and provide feedback. Here at the link will be an example of a questionnaire. That's if you use Google Forms. There are also centralized solutions. There's, for example, SpiderGap or Graph. I always confuse the name. Specifically for 360-degree evaluations, there are many providers that do 360-degree assessments. And there are HR automation systems that are also starting to include 360-degree evaluations. For example, 1C Enterprise has a 360-degree evaluation, or will have one soon. Accordingly, with a competency profile, you can easily conduct assessments. Here's an example of the competencies I used for the 360-degree assessment. We had corporate competencies that were broken down by levels. After the 360-degree assessment, it's very important to give people a report showing them by competencies how they evaluated themselves and how all parties evaluated them so they can understand where their gaps are. For example, they may have rated themselves high on a certain competency, but colleagues rated them low. This means that for these colleagues, the employee doesn't demonstrate this behavior much. Next, another area where we can use the job profile is for promotions. First, we can use it to compare differences between positions, that is, to see which positions are most closely related, generally from which positions it's worth considering candidates. Secondly, we can use it to select the best candidates. Here we might need an additional tool called 9box or Employee Evaluation Matrix. It's a matrix that can be prepared either manually in something like Excel, or it's built into HR automation systems. For example, Workday, which I mentioned before, has such a tool in Zoho, and I've encountered such a tool in Bamboo HR. What kind of matrix is it? This matrix is, you might say, a table consisting of 3 by 3 cells. So we have 9 cells in which all employees of the company are placed, with each employee falling into only one of the 9 cells. These cells are divided by people's performance and potential. Accordingly, the highest potential and highest performing employees fall into the top right box. And then you can work with them. They can be chosen as candidates for promotion because they are performing excellently and have the potential to work in a higher position. Here on the right, I've enlarged the blocks of this table slightly so it's visible on mobile devices. Next is succession planning, another process where a job profile can be useful. A succession plan is essentially a table where we select replacement options for our most valuable and critical positions, including immediate replacements who are ready now to step in if someone leaves, as well as future and potential replacements. Again, having job profiles helps us compare how close or far a person's current job profile is from the position we're planning succession for. These are the options. Your homework assignment today, which you can choose from, is to either develop an interview scorecard for candidates, create an employee development plan, create a succession plan for several positions, or fill out a 9-box grid for one department. That means placing the department's employees in the 9-box grid. Next, here's some useful literature I can recommend for today. These are 2 books, Performance Management and The Art of Recruitment. What's next? First of all, we're approaching the end of this course, which I congratulate you on. For all completed homework assignments, those who complete them with a grade of 4 or 5, we will issue diplomas. The diplomas look like this. You'll be able to add them to your LinkedIn. LinkedIn has a special section where diplomas are displayed. It will have a logo, the name of this course, academy, and a clickable link. To do this, when you receive your diploma, you'll need to click this button. To get a diploma, you need to have all your homework assignments checked. And when you know that you've received a grade of 4 or 5 on everything, no less, fill out the survey in your personal account. It's up there at the top. Fill out the survey to receive your diploma. Then click the Add to LinkedIn button. If this button isn't there and you see a check button instead, it means you're not logged in. You need to log in. If the button is there, a window like this will appear. Select the first option, Add to Personal Profile, and in the drop-down list, you need to select Pluto Academy. That is, it will already be listed here, but without the nice picture and logo. To have the logo load, you need to select it from the drop-down list. Then click Save. Check the box that the certificate is permanent, and voila, it's added. What else can be done? You can download the diploma in PDF format and print it. They're protected by QR codes, so nobody can copy or forge them. This means you can safely print them yourself. You can add a badge to your email signature. It'll be a nice red one for those who like to show off a bit. And if you ever need it, our diplomas can also be added to Headhunter. Next, some of our students choose to take other courses. Here are a few options to consider in case you're interested. With this, our today's lesson, as well as this course, is coming to an end. Congratulations on completing it. If you have any questions about today's lesson or the course, please write them in the chat. If there are no questions, write what was most useful for you today, what you're taking away from this. What do you think? Thank you. Inbox was an interesting tool. Okay. If you don't have any questions now, but they come up later as you apply what you've learned in this course, please write in the chat, ask, and I'll be happy to give advice and help. If there are no other questions in the comments, then I wish everyone a wonderful, productive day. Thank you all for participating in this course and for your engagement. I look forward to meeting with you again in the future. Have a good day. Bye-bye. See you soon.